Greetings, winners. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. Definitely let us know in the chat where you are tuning in from to our YouTube live today for our Wonsulting November Speaker Series. For those of you who may not know me, I'm Umeesha. I'm a program manager with Wonsulting, and I'm really excited to introduce you today our November Speaker Series, which will be on the stages of an interview. I know with this fall recruiting season, so many of us have been stressing out over applications and portfolios, and now so many of us are entering that scary but also exciting interview stage. So what better than to host a speaker series today for this month, actually not today, to really go over the stages of an interview and how we can best prepare as well. So do let me know where you're tuning in from. I see Atlanta, I see New York, so quite national and definitely international as well. So definitely let me know where you're tuning in from. We love to see where our Wonsulting members are coming and watching as well. But with that being said, I don't even want to elongate it any further. I'm really excited to introduce you to our speakers today with our November Speaker Series, starting with informational and traditional interviews. So let's go ahead and get them all onto our live stream. Good morning, ladies. How are you?
Hi.
Good morning.
Awesome. So I do want to introduce everybody, and starting off with the one and only Lucy Ring. Now, Lucy Ring is actually a senior talent partner at Twilio, and we also have Christina, who is an early careers recruiter at Goldman Sachs. And last but definitely not least, we also have Niki, who is a data engineering recruiter at Facebook. So thank you guys so much again for being a part of our panel today and for being so willing to talk to our communities, both international as well. And I want to go ahead and start it off with the first question. And my first question to all of you is, why are traditional interviews helpful? And Lucy, I would love to start off with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, thinking about the stages, traditionally the stages of an interview, every company is a little differently, but any point you'll probably have communications or initial conversation with a recruiter. And that's what you would call that, the informational screening or the recruiter screening. But then typically after that conversation, you'll move on to a traditional interview, which for the most part is a deep dive with the hiring manager or someone senior on the team to learn a little more about, the candidate's experience, background, and transferable relevant knowledge for alignment and match for the role, the team, and what the hiring team is looking for in building out their team in that role. So a really important piece of the interview process for both sides to see if there's further alignment beyond just, what the resume says and what the JD says.
Sorry about that technical difficulty, but if there's anything we've learned in 2020, technical difficulties have become the norm. But I'm glad that I made it back onto our StreamYard. And Lucy, thank you so much for sharing with us a little bit about why those interviews are so important from a recruiter's perspective. And for everybody on the chat, let's go ahead and put #Lucy on the comments to welcome her to this panel. We're really excited to learn a little bit more about the recruitment aspect, especially as a recruiter at Twilio. And I do want to ask as well, Christina, why are traditional interviews helpful for both the recruiters and also for the candidates?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'd say that the main purpose behind a traditional interview is really to get to know the candidate in person. At this point, the recruiter and the hiring manager have reviewed your resume on paper. You're a fit for the role. But the traditional interview really allows hiring managers and interviewers to gauge, how you might be on a team and how you might interact with other employees. And just thinking about a few examples of traditional interview questions, that could be anything from what are your strengths and weaknesses? How would you describe yourself? Why did you choose this career path? Just to name a few examples.
And those are the questions that we'll be getting into today as well towards the end, about how do we answer those questions that recruiters tend to ask during traditional interviews. And Niki as well, why are traditional interviews helpful for both the candidate and the recruiter?
Yeah. So when you say traditional, I'm assuming you mean the recruiter screen, that first step in the process. I think that, so I recruit by day and then I'm a mindset coach and career coach by night. So I always like to bring it back to mindset. I think that all roads lead to mindset for the interview process. And when you master your mindset, you can slay your interviews. It's like, this has to come before, it's like putting the cart before the horse or whatever that saying is. So you have to channel the mindset. I'm going to encourage and invite anyone who's watching this to channel the mindset starting today. If you have not yet done this, channel the mindset of a top performer. So how does a top performer is a person that gets all the jobs, the person who loves interviewing, who gets into it, who understands that the purpose of this whole process is to see if you are a fit for the company, but also if the company is a fit for you. And I know that that sounds really cliche and it sounds almost annoying if you are in a job search forever, if you really need a paycheck, you're like, I need any freaking job. I don't need to see if it's a great fit forever. I just need a job. I think that that's kind of like a losing strategy. You want to still move into a top performer energy to say, wait a minute, it's important for me to choose well where I work too. And I'm looking at this first step of the process as a top performer. I'm evaluating them as much as they're evaluating me. So that would be my main tip.
I definitely agree. And let's go ahead and put hashtag Niki and hashtag Christina on the chat as well to welcome them and to thank them again for being panelists on today's speaker series. And especially Niki, with what you said about mindset, let's go ahead and click that like button if you're working on your mindset right now and channeling the mindset of a top performer, as Niki just mentioned. And moving on a little bit to my next question, what is the purpose behind having a traditional interview? We talked a little bit about why they're so helpful, but why is it that recruiters need that initial screen with the candidate? And Niki, I'd love to start with you.
Yeah, so you have to think about it from a company's perspective. A company, especially nowadays, is getting so many applications. We're getting a lot of great resumes. You guys have so many resources at your fingertips now that you know how to make really good resumes. There's no excuse to not have an amazing resume or LinkedIn profile at this point. If you don't love your LinkedIn or your resume on a scale of 1 to 10, like a 9 or a 10, that's the first thing you got to really get to work on. That's just the first thing. But all these great resumes are coming in. So the recruiter screen, and this is my own personal opinion. I don't want to, I'm not here representing Facebook as like giving all the intel on Facebook. My personal opinion is that recruiters we have like a spidey sense, intuitive nature. Most of us are highly intuitive. We can read people really well. It's our job to do that. So we get really good at even just 5 minutes on a recruiter screening call, the first step of the process. We kind of know within 5 minutes if we want to move you forward. And I can't speak for everybody, but I know that a lot of recruiter friends I have, like we all say that. So it's really part of that, like feeling like the resume is good, but what's the vibe of this person? And do they sound good? Like they're going to now slay the rest of this process as well.
Right. And Christina, I noticed you nodding and smiling as well. So I'm guessing that you relate to what Niki just said in terms of knowing within those first 5 minutes. And in your mind, what's the purpose of that initial screen or that traditional interview for candidates?
Yeah, I absolutely love that. Love that spidey sense thing, because that's so true. A lot of recruiters are able to tell within, like the first 5 minutes, 5 to 10 of a candidate's screen, whether or not they're a fit for the role. And not only does it help us understand whether or not you're a fit, it could also help us understand if maybe you're better aligned to a different role. And so that traditional interview really is important to get to know you because, we looked at your resume, you're great on paper, but now what are you like over the phone or in a virtual interview or even in person?
Agreed. And Lucy, especially with the traditional interview, what would you say is the purpose that so many recruiters are looking for? And especially in that 5 minutes, what is the purpose or what are you looking for in a candidate to know, okay, this is somebody that I want to move forward with?
Yeah, absolutely. I think to Niki's point, we're all, depending on the company and the applicant pool, it's a competitive talent space right now. And so by the time that we've reviewed your resume and decided, hey, there might be alignment here, this is the opportunity to really double click into what's on paper to see, okay, how aligned are they to this role, but also how aligned are they to what the candidate's looking for in their search. If the candidate in the call says, hey, I've been managing the past 5 years, but I just don't like managing anymore. I prefer to be an individual contributor. and if I'm hiring for a manager role, although that is a fit on paper, without having that conversation, I wouldn't know that, realistically, this person's not interested in managing and they don't love that part about their job. So truthfully, that's not a fit because this job is fully managing, right? So it's really that opportunity to find that mutual fit and make sure that, the resume is truly who they say they are, and being able to assess for that and align it to what the team's looking for.
Right. And it's awesome that you talked about how important that conversation is and how you might be perfect or a perfect fit on paper, but it might be different when you're speaking to the recruiter. And I know a lot of us, we enjoy being able to speak to a recruiter and share a little bit more about our personality. But with 2020, so many of those have now transitioned into an online platform. And even with right now, with all of us being in different locations, but being in this panel, for in-person interviews, when that time comes again, what should a candidate bring to an interview, especially if the recruiter needs specific information, portfolio? And again, Christina, I'd love to start off with you.
Yeah, happy to answer. So really, you should only bring the necessities to your interview, whether that be, your personal bag. I like to bring a notebook and pen, sometimes a water bottle, depending on the interview. But prior to attending interviews, definitely encourage candidates to write a few questions that they'd like to ask towards the end of the interview, like in that notebook. And then when it is time for you to ask your questions, take that notebook out. I always like to ask my interviewers beforehand if it's okay to refer to my notebook with my questions, and I've never had an interviewer say no. They've always been impressed with, the preparedness and that you thought ahead. So I would say, yeah, the notebook, pen, maybe a couple of resumes on hand just in case, always helpful.
And Niki, I do want to ask you this question as well, because like Christina said, having those questions, having that notebook, having extra copies of a resume. But for you, has there ever been something else that they might need, like portfolios or anything that a candidate should bring to an interview that really helps them stand out?
I think everybody should bring things that help them stand out. To like nowadays, that's the name of the game. You just answered like the 99% of problems with people interviewing is that they don't stand out, and which lends itself to also, we can get into it in a bit, but not preparing enough. And I like there's a thing called the Value Validation Project by Austin Belczak, Belcak. Hopefully I'm not butchering his name, but Value Validation Project, VVP. He talks about it on his LinkedIn a lot. He's amazing. And this is basically a project that you create so that you can show that you've solved the company's problem so far. You are putting the man hours into this or woman hours into this behind the scenes before the interview. And then you can say, if this, hopefully you can guide the conversation so that it can come up organically with the person you're talking to say, actually, this problem that we're solving or we're talking about right now, I've created a project that I can show some of my ideas of how I would solve for this, or a deck that highlights XYZ certain things that you guys may be dealing with, or whatever. Some sort of additional project that you can say, do you mind if I share my screen, or do we have 5 minutes to share my screen here and show you what I was working on? Stand out. The goal is to always stand out. I know nowadays people are going to have their sticky notes and all their things like that, and their resume and their normal stuff to try to do well in these video interviews. But the name of the game is always standing out nowadays. How can you show up with better energy, more enthusiasm, and then also something special, something that they're not expecting? Also, another guy named Ramit Sethi. He's been around for a long time, career coaching. He calls it the briefcase technique. And back in the day, in person-to-person interviews, he would say that it landed offers like 9 out of 10 times. This psychological thing of like reaching into your briefcase and pulling out an actual tangible 30, 60, 90-day plan or something like that. If it was a marketing thing, he would pull it out and like, slide it across the table, and then they would be impressed by that. And then there's something physical and again, psychological that's going on there, where they're like pulling in a product that's like, wow, this person really put in the effort, and they're already connected to us as a company and as a brand and that kind of thing. Nowadays, it's all digital. It's like, hey, can I share my screen? But back in the day, it's like pulling it out of your briefcase, standing out. It's all about standing out.
And that also helps us in the now virtual world we live in as well, with just what you said about sharing your screen and having that plan and standing out. And go ahead and smash that like button if all of you are, trying to be the best candidate that you can when you are in these interviews and when you are talking to these recruiters, and especially trying to come up with those interesting 30, 60, 90-day plans to really distinguish yourself. And Lucy, I haven't really forgotten about you, but I do want to ask, is there anything else a candidate can bring to an interview? And that doesn't really have to only be materials, but in terms of attitude and in terms of any answers or anything that you're looking for as a recruiter, what are you looking for that a candidate should bring to an interview?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Niki and Christina both covered really good points in terms of that tangible, physical, what you should bring, as well as how to go above and beyond and stand out. I think one thing that I like to remind candidates is, we want to see you. We want to see the honest, authentic you. Because if you're here just to answer questions that you think we want the answers to, we can suss through that. We can feel it. We can tell it's inauthentic. And that would lead to questions around, hey, do they really want this job, or are they just trying to say the things, the right things, what they perceive to be the right things? So my recommendation in every step of the interview is be prepared. Yes, absolutely. Have examples, have portfolios, have previous projects that you can talk through in terms of your successes. But end of the day, you need to find the right job for you. So without speaking to that and only speaking to what you think we want, that's not going to end up to be a good match for both sides.
Right. And that is a perfect segue into my next question. And that is, what's the biggest mistake or big mistake that candidates make while interviewing? And Christina, I'd love to start off with you, definitely, about what those big mistakes might be.
Yeah, this is a really great question. So I'd say one of the biggest mistakes that candidates often make is that they often talk in cliches. So, instead of telling the interviewer, you're a natural leader, you're a great problem solver, it's better to come prepared with specific examples to display these qualities. So, for example, instead of saying that you're a team player, everyone says they're a team player, keep an example handy of you working on a group project or how you've supported a colleague in the past to prove that.
Yes, and I just saw right now as well about some people talking about the STAR method that some candidates might use to really provide that example. And Lucy, I would say, what else are big mistakes that candidates might make while interviewing as well?
Not asking questions. That is almost the nail in the coffin when, whether it's the recruiter or the interviewer at the end leaves time and says, what questions do you have for me? And they say, actually, no questions. I had them all answered, or I did my research and I know all the answers. This is the opportunity for you to really learn the nitty-gritty, the good, the bad, the ugly about this role, this team, the company, and the interviewer's experience. When in doubt, interviewers love talking about their experience. Ask them about how, what's inspired them to be an X, Y, and Z role. What has led them to success at this company? What does career growth look like? You want to demonstrate that you did research on the interviewer, but also true curiosity around the role that you're applying for. But if you come in and don't have questions prepared, that's a big red flag.
Right, exactly. And let us know in the chat too, what are some of those mistakes that you think candidates make, or that maybe you have made in the past as well, that you learned from in midst of interviewing with recruiters and going through the job search process? And Niki, of course, what's that big mistake that you think candidates make while interviewing as well?
Okay, so I have one that I've kind of already alluded to, and it will go into your next question most likely too. But I have top 5 that if you guys want to follow me, I'll soon be announcing some different resources and stuff that I'm launching to flesh this out a little bit more, because I have 5 key mistakes that I call them job search or interview killers rather. But the one that is the most important, I think, is around not preparing enough. And there's a ratio rule that I tell my clients and candidates that's like the 12-1. And this was also by Ramit Sethi. And it's like the 12 hours preparing for every 1 hour interview. This is what top performers do. And when regular people, like when I first heard that, I was like, what? That's crazy. So regular people are like, that's a lot, right? But there are so many ways that you can and you should fill up 12 hours of preparation for a 1-hour interview. And there's just so many, looking people up, listening to podcasts featuring the C-level executives. I have a list of so many ways that you can actually properly prep and research companies before their interviews, and all this free stuff's coming out soon. But the main one is over preparing does something really valuable for you, because you're basically trying to retrain and calm your nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is what really kind of incites that fight or flight response. You know, if you've ever talked on stage or done a presentation or something like that, and you feel like that fight or flight response as if you're getting eaten by a lion or a tiger is chasing you, not just preparing before the interview, mock interviews are something that I tell everyone. If you have, you know, a really important interview, you need to do 10 mock interviews before that thing, because you're trying to get into a state of not hating interviewing. You're trying to get to a state of calming your nervous system, because once you've done it more than, you know, a handful of times, you will then become, your body gets readjusted to it, and your body tells your brain, I'm not going to die. There's no tigers chasing me. So you can show up, and that's how you get to a state of comfort. That's how you're able to now have fun and play with some of these common interview questions and make it feel more charismatic and just normal. So over preparing and doing a lot of mock interviews, I think you guys should be doing those before the interview is on your calendar. Do like one a day for the next 30 days. And it's impossible to not improve over 30 days time. So that's my tip there.
And I love that, because it comes at the perfect time for our next question as well. And that is, how can a candidate prepare for an interview? And Niki, I'll let you go ahead and take a break, since you just shared a little bit about how we can do that, especially with our mock interviews for, you know, the next 10 days or the next 30 days. And Lucy, how can candidates prepare for an interview?
Yeah. I think, you know, some of the kind of go-tos and the obvious is research your interviewer. Find them on LinkedIn, right? Even ask them to connect beforehand. They may take you up on it, they may not, but it doesn't hurt, right? Now, if you have any portfolios, or if you're interviewing for a technical role or something that can be, your success can be spoken to through data, bring those metrics, bring those successes and speak to them, because that concrete example will help the interviewer understand your successes better, right? And something that, you know, I think I'll attribute to my prior career. I was in the public accounting. I was a CPA before I was a recruiter. And so I got in this habit when looking into new jobs and interviewing to read their financials. If they're a public company or even a private company, there's going to be financial information, business decision, performance metrics online published. Read that to give you a good sense of the business strategy overall, the company performance. That'll help you speak more intelligently to whatever role you're applying for at that company.
Definitely. And Christina as well, are there any other tips that candidates can use when preparing for an interview?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that Lucy just said. And, you know, we hear this so often, do your research. Just like taking a look at financials, I think it's important to look at recent news articles or press releases on the company's website. And it's funny, I have a background in public relations, which is why I tend to go to the press releases on the website. But in addition to that, just important to research the division or team that you're interviewing for and read over the job description. And one thing I like to do and encourage candidates to do when preparing for an interview is to read the responsibilities within a job description, then come up with personal examples of times you've either experienced that type of responsibility or duty in your current role or past roles.
Yes, definitely. And go ahead and comment #insightful if you've been finding these tips insightful, especially with what Christina and Lucy just shared, and especially Niki as well about those mock interviews and how we can continuously prepare for the next interview that we have. And that goes a little bit into my next question, because like I said, with 2020 being such a weird year for so many, we've now transitioned into an online platform. And Niki, I think you mentioned this a little bit about how interviews are now virtual, and all three of you talked a little bit about sharing screens and still having those digital portfolios. But my question for you is, does a virtual interview by any chance impact a candidate's chances of getting a job? Or in other words, does it help them? Can it hurt them? And Niki, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I don't think that there's any way that it can hurt a candidate nowadays, because it's become so normal. We have totally normalized all kinds of events like this. This stuff used to be like, oh, meet you at this event, this this bar or this place where we're doing all these like, we've just normalized being online. So that's a good thing. And in the beginning, I'm sure it was pretty stressful. I remember when there were a lot of candidates that had to cancel their on-sites and shift to the virtual interviews, and it was definitely that transition period. But nowadays, I think people have gotten so used to it that even interviewers, they like that they can sit on, in their comfort of their home too, and kind of, just connect and create that rapport instead of running meeting to meeting to meeting to, hi, nice to meet you, and then running to another meeting. So it can hurt you. I think that it's very personal though, how a candidate feels about this. We're all very different. We all have, again, that's where the practice comes in, because there's so many tips of how to do well in interviews, like looking at the camera instead of looking at yourself, and all these kind of things, and getting good lighting and having just a set up that you feel confident in. I think that the biggest tip with online anything is just to make a space that you feel good in. And when you feel good, you put out good vibes and good energy. And I'm all about the energy with interviewing. So I think that it's always a personal thing. You have to do the soul searching. You have to do the mindset work. You have to reflect to say, how do I show up? Am I more authentic on screen in the morning when my lighting is better in my room, or at night I feel more confident when I can turn on my ring light and have a quiet space? You have to know yourself. You have to get to know yourself and how you show up best. And when you feel good, again, putting out good vibes, that's really, at the end of the day, there is no right or wrong with this stuff. It's just what works for you.
Right. And go ahead and click that like button if you're trying to put off that positive vibes and that positive energy, even when you're sitting right in front of a recruiter and trying to showcase your personality too. I know a lot of us try to create that space where we're comfortable, especially now that we're all at home. And Lucy and Christina, that goes into my next question that I wanted to ask the two of you. And that is, what virtual interview tips do you have that a candidate can use, especially on a computer in our remote world today? And Christina, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what tips you have for virtual interviews.
Yeah, I have a few tips I like to share with my candidates. One, test your technology. That is so important. Make sure that you have reliable internet connection, your sound is working, your video is working. And if that means, logging in 10 minutes before your interview just to test it, go for it. That's what I did with this video. Just wanted to make sure everything was right before joining this panel. And then also just practice speaking in the mirror or on video, because it is awkward the first time you do it and can be distracting to yourself. And on top of that, just minimizing all distractions overall. Putting your phone away, putting it on silence, just putting it in a different room even, letting your family and friends or roommates know, like, I'm interviewing from this time to this time, like, please don't come in or interrupt during this time, or even have them leave the house or apartment during that time. And just also ensuring that maybe the background isn't too distracting as well.
Yes, and you know what? Go ahead and click that like button if you guys have had to ask your family to stay away a little bit, or have to put your phone in a different room, because if there's anything that we've all learned today is we've definitely had to make a lot of just different adaptations to what is now 2020. And Lucy, what virtual interview tips should a candidate prepare for now in our world today?
Yeah, I think Christina covered a lot of the really great ones. Something that I think some candidates would never forget if it was an in-person interview, but sometimes can forget when it is virtual, is presentation, right? Think about you're presenting yourself. I've had candidates take their Zoom interviews using their phone, where, it might be a vertical and wrong angled camera with bad quality, when, if you have the access to a laptop camera, please use that. Now, I've had candidates sit on their bed with ratty t-shirts and the camera pointing upwards. And while, that may not distract themselves from how they are answering the questions, the interviewer will get an impression that you're not serious about this interview, right? You would not show up in an in-person interview with a ratty free t-shirt. So treat it as such. That doesn't mean you need to dress up, with a suit and tie. My best practice there and advice there is wear what's comfortable for you, but also understand the professionalism level and expectation at the company, and try going one step above that. And, you know, making sure that you're showing the interviewer you're there, you care, and you want to interview for this role.
Right, exactly. And again, comment #insightful if you've been finding these tips insightful, especially with what Lucy was said about how we present ourselves, whether virtual or in person. And this actually next section of our panel is going to be a little bit more interesting because I want to ask these recruiters some of the questions that they get to ask us when we are candidates. So we're actually turning the table real quick. And one of the first questions that we tend to get as candidates, and I'm sure the three of you did as well when you were in the job search, is tell me about yourself. And so many of us don't know how to answer this question. And I know that has to do with mindset, like what you said, Niki, but I definitely want to start off with Christina a little bit. You know, how would you answer this question? Or what are you looking for as a recruiter for the candidate who has to answer this question as well?
Yeah. So this is asked in almost every interview, right? So it serves as an icebreaker. It's an easy transition from small talk into the interview into, you know, the nitty-gritty questions. And the structure that I've always used for the question, tell me about yourself. I saw this in an article a few years back, but you start with present. So what are you currently doing? Where do you work? What's the scope of your work? Then go into your past. How did you get to where you are currently? Where were you prior? It's also a good opportunity to mention relevant past experiences, and then end it with the future. What are you looking to do, and why are you excited for this role? So that's sort of the structure that I follow in answering tell me about yourself.
Right, exactly. And like I said, comment #excited if you're a little excited to see what recruiters would answer to their own questions. And Niki, definitely want to hear a little bit more. How would you answer the question, tell me about yourself? Or what are you looking for as a recruiter when it comes to this specific question?
Yeah, the main thing that I'm personally looking for, and I'd love to see if the other gals agree, is I like what was just said about starting with present and then going back, but there's no wrong way. If you want to say, I've been in the data and analytics space for 20 years, I started my career here, I moved into this, this, and that, which brings me to present, and kind of tell it in that quick, clear, concise way, that's totally fine too. But the main thing that I look for, this is like it was said too, it's an icebreaker. This is an icebreaker question. So they're trying to break the ice, but they're also feeling you out to see what kind of an interviewer you are going to be for the whole rest of this thing. And a telltale sign of somebody who is going to be kind of painful in their interview process is if they are, and I say that lovingly, are they just giving too long-winded of an answer? The tell me about yourself should be no longer than a minute or two. It's like the high level. It's the elevator pitch, basically. It's that high level elevator pitch of your experience. This is why there's no excuse to not nail it. We all can figure out how to very seamlessly say, I've been doing this, led me to this, and then I'm super passionate about this, which is why I'm excited about this company, that what you guys do. Like drop what they do, like boom, 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 and like 90 seconds or so. And then it's going to go into all the other, you know, actual nitty gritty stuff. But you don't want to tell your whole life story in the like first tell me about yourself thing.
Right, and that's actually a perfect way to put it together, and having that concise 1 to 2 minutes, and even with what you said, Christina, about having that structure, that really helps a lot of us the next time we have to answer that question. And Lucy, I want to go on to the next interview question that so many of us get to answer, and of course you get to ask, and that is, where do you see yourself 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What is it that recruiters want to know from the candidate when we're answering this question?
Yeah, I think it's tricky. I think it depends on, truthfully, where you are in your career, right? If you're a new grad, 5 years from now may look completely different than if you're a tenured enterprise account executive in the field for 15 years, right? I think you have to go back to what Niki was saying about self-reflection, about mindset, figuring out what are you looking to develop in terms of your career development in the next 5 years? Are you looking to hone and refine your craft and then eventually be a people manager and lead others? Or are you looking to build out your portfolio with, you know, certain UX projects on larger enterprise companies or smaller businesses, right? And I think we're just looking to see how your how you're thinking about your career goals and how that aligns to this role and if that'll get you there. What we're not looking for is for someone to say what we think they want to hear, which is, in 10 years, I want to be the CFO of your company, which is an awesome goal. And if that's truly what it is, that's great. But oftentimes when candidates share that type of response, it's usually because they think we want to hear that. And it's not. We really do want to know what you want to do in the next 5 years.
Right. And I think so many of us stress out a little bit about, what are we having for dinner tonight, let alone what are we doing 5 years from now? So the fact that you shared a little example as to what you do want to hear and then also what you don't want to hear, that's really helpful for us. So go ahead and smash that like button if you agree with what Lucy just shared about that question. And I want to move on a little bit and ask Christina, actually, the next question that some recruiters ask, and that is, why are you leaving your current job? Or what happened in your past job for you to now be in the job search? And Christina, what are you looking for as a recruiter, and how can a candidate answer this question?
Yeah, so I guess first off, you absolutely never want to talk poorly about your company, about your manager, former managers. So to answer this question, definitely frame your answer in a positive way. So thinking of examples, if you're leaving your job because you're bored, maybe you share instead that, you've learned a lot in your current role, you're looking for new challenges, you're looking for ways to develop your skill. People leave their roles for many reasons, whether that be, they're looking for career growth, they're wanting to work in a different industry, work-life balance. So it's just really about framing it in the right way and letting the interviewer know why this role is the perfect transition for you.
Right, exactly. And Niki, if you are a recruiter asking a candidate, why are you leaving your current job? I think, Christina, you did an excellent job talking about, don't talk bad upon your old company or your old boss. But Niki, do you have anything else that we should add when we're a candidate answering this question?
Yeah, I think that the main thing is you always do have to get into the head of the person. This goes into the research and stuff. You want to get into the head of the company, the person. When you spend so much time diving into a company, you should truly understand what not only their problems, but where their future is going and what you can project that they're going to be working on. So if your goal, and let's say you're in the tech space and you're working with a certain type of technology or something like that, you're going to know that this company's doing this, in a couple of years, they're probably going to be moving into blah, blah, blah. You want to drop the stuff that they're doing. Okay. You want to make it relevant. And I think that that's people, yes, we do want to know, and we want to make sure we're always evaluating for that right fit. But at the same time, you're still interviewing for a role today. Oh, I'm sorry. So the why are you leaving your current job thing, I'm thinking about the 5 to 10 years from now. But either way, same thing. You want to get into the head of them and what's going on at this company and how can that be relevant. You don't want to say you're leaving your job because they do blah, 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 certain things that this company actually does or will be doing 5 years from now or next year. So you just, in that over-researching stage, you really are able to then get ahead of a lot of these answers. Yes, you want to be honest. Yes, you want to be genuine and authentic to yourself, but you do want to kind of tie into the company and what they're projecting to do moving forward.
Right. And as Niki finishes that answer too, I do want to tell everybody watching, we'll actually be entering a Q&A really quickly as well. So for the questions that you have for these 3 incredible recruiters who've taken their time to answer these questions for us, definitely go ahead and add it into the comments below, #question, and we'll definitely go ahead and call on you to give you an answer as to how you can master the next traditional interview that you go on. And before we move on to the Q&A though, I do want to ask Lucy, you talked a little bit about, talk about a time where you did this or that in an interview and why recruiters might use that question. And what is a recruiter looking for when somebody asks, talk about a time when you had to work closely with someone else who maybe had a different personality, or talk about a time where you had to overcome a scenario where you really struggled. And what are you looking for in terms of those behavioral questions?
Yeah, we're looking for teamwork. Someone who is able to collaborate and work closely with the team. And we're looking for someone who's able to be a leader and be able to drive results with working with different personalities. And quite frankly, we've all worked with people who don't work or don't think the same way as us, but we want to know that there's examples in your past that you've been able to successfully overcome that. So when in doubt, use the STAR method. Google that. It's a great way to approach answering behavioral situational questions if you don't have a specific way that has worked for you.
Right, thank you. And again, go ahead and click that like button if you agree with what Lucy said. But I do want to transition slowly into more of a Q&A that our community has for the three of you as well. So Christina, Lucy, and Niki, thank you guys so much for being so open and so honest about the recruitment process, especially from your side. And I do want to go ahead and start off with this one question from our Wonsulting winner, and that is, when you were in the job hunting phase, what are your thoughts about recruiters ghosting you? Did that ever happen to you, and how did it feel as a candidate? And I'm so sorry, Christina, we can go ahead and start with you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, nobody likes to be ghosted, whether that be in your personal life, your work life, and it's absolutely happened to me. And I'm sure many other recruiters can relate to that feeling of getting ghosted. It's not a good feeling, and it's something that a lot of companies are trying to improve on their end. There are a lot of applicants, yes, but that doesn't mean that, we can't send a simple turn down email, at least so the candidate is notified. So that's sort of my thoughts on ghosting. But yes, I've experienced it. It's not fun, but you just keep on going, just apply, just keep putting your resumes out there and hope for the best.
Right, and that's something that we talk about a lot in Wonsulting as well, is that perseverance and to keep going regardless, because again, you only need that one yes for, your next job. And I do want to pass it on to our Wonsulting winner, Felicia, who had a really good question about the salary requirement. Do you give the range when a recruiter asks you what you're interested are in terms of salary, or do you wait to discuss later? And Niki, I'd love to hear your thoughts about this.
Yeah, I always go back to the top performer. Like, what would a top performer do? Like, we all know, what would Jesus do? Like, what would a top performer do? Like, that's what you should be asking yourself at every step of this thing. So how would a top performer answer the salary thing? They would say something to the vein of, I'm happy to discuss that as we move further in the process and I understand more about the role, and responsibilities. Because a top performer is like, they don't want to throw out a number too soon. They may throw out a range or some kind of ballpark, but or say I'm looking for something in the total compensation of X amount, but I'm flexible depending on how your package works out. Something like that is a top performer answer, where you're still kind of, if they're really pushing you for a number, you're giving that, but you're saying, but I'm flexible depending on the package, because I'm talking to all kinds of different companies and I know it can break down differently, company to company, base, bonuses, equity, all these things. So top performers, happy to discuss further later down the road when I understand more about the role and responsibilities. But something like this amount, depending on how it breaks down, I'm flexible, something like that.
Right. And Niki, I love the way you put it. What would a top performer do? And go ahead and click that like button if that's a question that you're going to ask yourself in your next interview as well, depending on whether it's a salary requirement question or any question that the recruiter might ask. And I do want to pass it out a little bit into our next Wonsulting winner, who had an incredible question about letting the recruiter know if we are open to other positions that maybe we didn't apply for in the company. And Lucy, I'd love to hear your thoughts about this as well.
Yes, I get this question a lot, or I encourage candidates to think about alignment beyond just the one role they apply for, because every company calls the roles, the teams a little differently. And it's a little hard from the outside to know exactly what that is for this certain company, right? I know I can speak for myself. For Twilio, we have a big sales organization, and every company will align their segments a little differently. So I think the way you approach that is truly figure out, look at the job board, figure out a small handful that look like they might be aligned to what your experience is and where you can be successful and what you're looking for. How you shouldn't approach it is saying, I'm willing to work for X company in any role, any capacity, because in that scenario, that doesn't show that there's a specific job that you're interested in. It's more, I'll take anything mentality. And we don't really know what to do with that. You know, we want to know where your experience fits in. So come prepared with a couple of jobs and say, hey, I know we're looking to discuss this. Can you tell me a little more about these other roles, just to make sure I have my expectations and what I'm looking for aligned correctly?
Right, exactly. And I absolutely love how you shared that as well, especially when it comes to open positions and not just saying, okay, yeah, I'm down for anything as long as I'm working for this company. And Christina, I want to bring it back to you because we had an excellent question come in from Wonsulting winner Brandon, who talked a little bit about not being able to move on to the next step of the process and how many of us don't hear back about why we didn't reach that next step, and how can we obtain specific and actionable feedback from recruiters to improve for the next time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will start off by saying, in a lot of companies, feedback is confidential. So completely understand it can be difficult getting that actionable feedback from recruiters, from interviewers, but don't hesitate to ask. You put in the effort to attend this interview. You took the time out. Maybe you're currently working and you took some time off to attend this. So you have every right to reach out after an interview, after learning that you've been turned down, and just asking, thank you, first of all, for inviting me to this interview. Enjoyed meeting all of the interviewers and hiring managers. I'm looking to apply to other roles, both within the firm and outside of the firm. What actionable feedback might there be for me to improve in future interviews? Something along those lines.
Right. And I think so many of us might forget to add that email right after the interview, asking for that as well, because so many of us are afraid. So I love that you brought that up, Christina, and thank you for answering that question from Brandon. And Niki, I do want to move on to you. We have Risha, who definitely, first of all, thinks you're awesome and loves the advice that you've been giving, but also, what's the one thing a candidate has either said or done in the first round that has made you think, okay, wow, they are the absolute star for this role?
That's a good question. Hi, Risha. So in the first round, again, this goes back to that, we know in 5 minutes thing, we already know, but when you're in that first round state and you're just nailing all the things, then it's just rock star. They are a rock star. They've answered the tell me about yourself right. They've done all these different things. The main one I always talk about, and I'm always dropping, the career coaching advice and the dating advice, they go hand in hand, is not giving desperate vibes. Even if you are desperate, you cannot put off that desperate energy. So the best part about the top performers, and I should just make t-shirts of what would a top performer do? But because I say this all the time, but the best thing about these top performer candidates is that by the end of the call, they have just nailed every single thing, including no desperate energy. They've built rapport somehow. They've made you enjoy the conversation, because let's face it, recruiters are having a lot of conversations every day, and it's always about standing out. And when you can uplift a recruiter or say something funny or do something to kind of break the ice, that's a very simple way of standing out. Somebody just shared on my Mindset Monday coaching last night, somebody shared a tip about stalking the interviewers, but in a way of taking it a step further, such as you are, that they run marathons because you've stalked them, or you see that they're part of the New York Runners Club on their LinkedIn or something like that. Then you drop something about running. You drop something about something that you may have in common with them, and don't expect that this is always going to land, but it could. And then you've now made yourself memorable. You've maintained good energy. You've nailed all the questions that they've had. You've kept it very clear and concise. You make them feel uplifted by the end of the call versus your energy drained. That's a big thing. So that's, to me, top performer, rock star, let's move you forward type of a thing.
Right. And thank you so much, Niki, for sharing a little bit about, those first 5 minutes and how they can be so impactful for the recruiters. And let's go ahead and show some love to our speakers and comment #Lucy, #Niki, and #Christina in the chat below. But before we go, I do want to ask all three of you the next question that's coming from Wonsulting winner Mina, because I think this is a question that so many of us have. And Christina, I'd love to start off with you. Do you value work experience more than volunteer experience as a recruiter, even though, let's say, the volunteer experience may be related to the job?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, if you're a recent graduate and you don't have work experience yet, but we see that, you were involved in college, you volunteered a lot, that looks great. It's not like, you're not just applying to jobs, having no experience. You're actually, putting in the effort. You have something on your resume, and that looks great in a recruiter's eyes, in my opinion.
Right, exactly. And Niki, what about you? Do you value work experience more than volunteer experience by any chance?
I think it depends where you're recruiting at. If you're trying to get into the top tech companies, you have to have the relevant work experience. This goes without saying. But if you're like applying for startups or small to mid-sized companies, any of that stuff works and it's good. I think that anytime you can show and have things to talk about that are in alignment with what it is you're going for, that's always a good thing. So I don't think you can ever get knocked, but I think like the real work experience is still, for most roles, it's still going to always take value over the volunteering. However, for recent grads, that's a whole different ballgame. So it's about getting creative too, though. Like if you have the time and the space right now, and you want to dive into projects and do stuff like this, working with Wonsulting and these kinds of different things. I could use some help for my new podcast. Who wants to work with me? So if you want to like add some resume food and also get some really relevant experience, it can't hurt. None of this stuff can hurt. You're going to learn more about what you do like and you don't like through these projects. And I think learning about what you don't like is really valuable as well, especially when you're in an early stage part of your career. So do all.
Exactly. And let's go ahead and click that like button if you agree with what Christina and Niki just shared. And Lucy, I do want to ask you as well, do you value work experience more than volunteer experience, even if that volunteer experience is more related to the job?
Yeah, so once again, I think it just depends on where you are in your career and what the company's looking for. I'm thinking back to my time in public accounting. They do a heavy, college recruiting effort, right? And so during that time, while my work experience as a hostess at a restaurant was relevant, show that I could hold a job, maybe the volunteer experience part of my sorority being the treasurer was more relevant in that case. So It just depends. It depends on what the volunteer opportunity is and what the job is.
Right, exactly. And again, to the three of you, thank you guys so much for being willing to share so much about the recruitment process from a candidate's perspective and from a recruiter's perspective. That hour just flew by for me. I'm sure it did for you as well, and especially for everybody watching, because I did not even know that we were coming on to the top of the hour. But thank you again, Lucy, Christina, and Niki, for taking an hour out of your Tuesday to share a little bit more about traditional interviews. I know a lot of us are going through that stage right now, and we're nervous as we're starting to prepare. So I do want to thank all of you, and then I do want to thank every single person who is watching our Wonsulting November Speaker Series Day 1, which is informational and traditional interviews. We are going to be continuing this week tomorrow, and that will be on technical interviews. So definitely come back if you're interested in technical based roles, because we'll be diving a little bit more into what we need to do in order to prepare for technical interviews. But with that being said, don't forget to subscribe to our Wonsulting YouTube and turn on that notification bell, and we'll see you guys back tomorrow. And Lucy, Christina, and Niki, thank you guys so much for coming on as speaker as well.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much.